He left me and our 5-year-old daughter to freeze in the Rockies, convinced he had finally shed his dead weight for a mistress. He thinks I am weak and penniless, but he committed a fatal error. He has no clue that beneath this ragged coat stands the sole heiress to a $2.3 billion empire, and I am going to use every cent to destroy him. My name is Serafina, and as the wind howled against the windows of our SUV, I felt a chilling premonition that had nothing to do with the storm outside. We were crawling through the treacherous curves of Wolf Creek Pass, the headlights cutting weak, trembling beams through a whiteout so dense it felt like we were driving into a wall of milk. Julian was gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, his face illuminated intermittently by the glow of his phone which sat in his lap. He was texting again, his thumb flying across the screen before he quickly flipped the device face down. "This route was a mistake," Julian snapped, his voice tight with an anger that seemed disproportionate to the situation. "I told you we should have waited until morning. You never listen to me, do you?" I glanced into the rearview mirror. Lily was fast asleep in her booster seat, her small head resting against the window, clutching her worn-out teddy bear. At least she was safe from his temper for now. Suddenly, Julian slammed on the brakes, causing the heavy car to skid slightly on the black ice before coming to a halt on a desolate, dark bend of the road. "Do you hear that?" he asked sharply. "Hear what? I don't hear anything but the wind." "Julian, the rear passenger wheel," he insisted, refusing to look me in the eye. "It sounds like something is grinding against the rim. It's dangerous." He unlocked the doors. "Get out and check it. I need to keep my foot on the brake or we will slide backward off the cliff." Just go look," I hesitated. The request felt wrong, but the fear of crashing with Lily in the back overrode my instincts. I opened the door, and the storm assaulted me instantly. It was minus 25 degrees, and the air bit into my skin like thousands of invisible razor blades. I wrapped my coat tighter and trudged toward the back of the vehicle, squinting against the stinging snow. I reached the rear tire and crouched down. There was nothing there. Thunk! The sound of the central locking mechanism engaging was dry and final. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I scrambled back to the passenger door and yanked on the handle. Locked. I pounded on the glass with my frozen fist. Inside. Julian turned his head slowly. He didn't look concerned. He looked at me with a smirk that curled his lip, a look of pure, malicious triumph. "Julian," I screamed, the wind stealing the sound from my lips. Open the door." He didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot on the accelerator. The SUV lurched forward, the tires spinning before gripping the ice, spraying dirty slush over my legs. "No," I shrieked, sprinting after the fading taillights. I ran until my lungs burned. Slipping and crashing face first into the snow, I clawed my way back up, ignoring the pain. My terror wasn't for myself. It was absolute agony for my child. "Lily, you have my daughter come back." The car was about 50 meters away, slowing down to navigate a sharp turn. Suddenly, the rear interior light flickered on. The back door swung open. I stopped breathing. I watched in horror as Julian reached back and shoved a small figure out of the moving car. Lily tumbled into the deep snowbank on the shoulder, her pink backpack still strapped to her shoulders. The door slammed shut, and Julian sped away, his taillights disappearing into the swirling white darkness. Lily. I forced my legs to move, sprinting through the knee-deep drifts until I reached her. I pulled her out of the snow, brushing the ice from her face. She was trembling violently, her eyes wide with shock. As I held her shivering body against mine, something inside me fractured and reformed into cold steel. Julian had just crossed the line from a bad husband to a man who needed to be obliterated. "Mommy," she whimpered, her teeth chattering. "I've got you," I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. I have got you." I pulled the backpack off her shoulders to check for injuries. I unzipped the front compartment. Tucked behind her spare mittens was a small, black device that looked like a portable charger. It was a camouflage-cased military satellite beacon. I had carried it for years, a secret failsafe from a life Julian knew nothing about. I pressed the activation button. The tiny red light on the device pulsed rhythmically, a stark contrast to the chaotic white swirl of the blizzard. It was a silent heartbeat, transmitting the Phoenix protocol directly to the high-security command center in New York. That signal meant one thing: the heir to the Sterling Empire was in imminent mortal danger. My father's voice, stern and uncompromising, echoed in my mind, drowning out the howling wind. Panic is a luxury you cannot afford. Serafina, assess, adapt, survive. I forced the trembling in my hands to stop. I could not be the terrified wife Julian had left on the side of the road. I had to be the daughter of a Titan. "Mommy." "I'm cold," Lily whimpered, her voice barely audible over the gale. "I know, baby, I know," I said, scooping her up despite the screaming muscles in my legs. "We have to play a game. We are explorers, remember? We have to find a secret cave." I shielded her small body with my own, taking the brunt of the ice pellets that slashed through the air. Every step was a battle against the deep snow that threatened to swallow us whole. I kept talking, forcing a steady stream of words to keep her conscious, to keep the deadly lethargy of hypothermia at bay. I told her stories of dragons and fire, of warmth and safety, even as my own eyelashes froze together. After what felt like an eternity, we found a shallow recession in the cliff face, a small overhang protected from the biting wind. It was barely a shelter, but it was enough. I collapsed onto the frozen ground, pulling Lily into my lap. I ripped open her backpack with numb fingers. My heart leaped when I found the lighter I had confiscated from her science experiments a week ago and forgotten to remove. Next to it was a handful of dry twigs and pine cones she collected. "Look, Lily, magic," I whispered. It took 5 tries, my thumb slipping on the flint, but finally, a spark caught the dry pine needles. A small, fragile flame flickered to life, illuminating the terror in my daughter's eyes. I checked her frantically. The expensive ski suit Julian had bought only because he wanted her to look presentable for his Instagram photos had saved her. Her core was warm. Lily looked up at me, her face streaked with tears and melting snow. "Mommy, why did Daddy push me? Did I do something bad?" The question felt like a physical blow to my chest, more painful than the freezing cold. "No, baby. Oh, God, no." I pulled her tight, rocking her back and forth. "You are perfect. Daddy is sick in his head, but he will never, ever hurt you again. I promise." I stared into the fire, and the memory of meeting Julian washed over me. I saw myself 5 years ago, wearing a thrift store sweater, sitting in a campus library, pretending to be a scholarship student drowning in debt. I had wanted to be loved for myself, not for the sterling billions. I thought Julian was my fairy tale. I thought he was the one man who saw Serafina, the woman, not the heiress. I had been so incredibly stupid. Suddenly, a deep, thrumming vibration shook the ground beneath us. The sound of the wind was drowned out by the roar of heavy engines. "What is that?" Lily cried out, burying her face in my coat. "Help," I said, a cold resolve settling over me. A blinding spotlight cut through the darkness, turning the night into an artificial noon. The snow whirled violently as a black helicopter hovered above the clearing, the stylized S on its fuselage gleaming like a weapon. Men in tactical gear rappelled down, moving with terrifying precision. These were not local park rangers. These were the vanguards, the Sterling Corporation's private paramilitary extraction unit. They landed in the snow and sprinted toward us. The lead officer, a giant of a man, skidded to a halt in front of the fire. He looked at my ragged appearance, then at Lily. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head in deep reverence. "Mistress Seraphina," he said, his voice thick with shame through the tactical mask. "We are late. We have failed you." I stood up, lifting Lily effortlessly. The shivering housewife was gone. In her place stood the woman who owned the ground these men walked on. "Get us on board," I commanded, my voice devoid of fear. I looked down at the valley where Julian was driving toward his freedom. My eyes narrowed. "Take me to the safe villa and tell Thorne to wake the legal team. Start the campaign." The warmth of the safe house was suffocating, a stark contrast to the biting frost that still lingered in my bones. This was the Eyrie, a fortress of glass and timber hidden deep in the peaks of the Rockies, completely invisible from the main roads. I sat wrapped in a cashmere blanket while a private medical team tended to the frost nip on my fingers. Through the glass partition of the adjoining room, I watched Lily sleeping soundly. She was guarded by Mrs. Higgins, her favorite nanny whom I had kept on a private retainer for years without Julian ever knowing. The heavy oak door creaked open. Thorne stepped in. At 60 years old, with silver hair and a mind like a steel trap. He did not look like a servant. He looked like an executioner waiting for a command. He held a thick leather dossier under his arm. "The doctor says you will heal physically, Miss Sterling," Thorne said, his voice low and steady. "But I fear the other matters require urgent attention." I sat up straighter, ignoring the sting in my toes. "Total blackout. Thorne. No police reports yet. No media. As far as the world knows, Julian is a worried husband, and his wife and child are simply missing. Or dead. I want him to believe he succeeded." Thorne nodded, opening the file on the coffee table. "He did not stay to look for you. He drove straight to the Aspen Silverleaf Resort. He checked into the presidential suite 20 minutes ago. He is not alone." "Who is she?" I asked, though the answer was already forming in my gut. "Bianca Veretti." "His rival at the architecture firm." Thorne handed me a tablet. "We accessed the cloud server of the dashcam you installed last month." He thought he turned it off, but he only dimmed the screen. I pressed play. The video was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. Julian was driving, laughing as the wipers fought against the snow. Bianca was in the passenger seat my seat. "Don't worry, babe." Julian's voice sneered from the speakers. "That bitch and her brat just need a lesson. They will freeze a little, cry a lot, and by tomorrow morning when I go back to pick them up, they will be obedient like little puppies." I felt a cold rage replacing the blood in my veins. He wasn't just cruel, he was calculating. He planned to break us like horses. Thorne swiped to the next page of the report. "It gets worse." We audited his personal accounts. He has been siphoning funds from small residential projects to pay for dinners and hotels with Ms. Veretti. But more disturbingly, he used your social security number to secure high-interest loans from unregulated lenders. He thinks he is funding a new life, but he is drowning in debt he put in your name. I looked at the screen one last time. It showed a live feed of a hotel security cameras we had hacked. Julian was popping a bottle of champagne, toasting to his freedom. He looked so happy, so arrogant. "I can have the FBI at his door in 10 minutes, Thorne suggested. "No," I said, standing up and letting the expensive blanket fall to the floor. "Arresting him now is too merciful. He thinks he is a king. I want him to climb. I want him to reach the very peak of his delusions." I walked toward the window, looking out at the darkness. And then I want to be the one to push him off. What are your orders? Buy his firm, I commanded, Apex Horizons. Buy it tonight. Use the shell company. Buy tomorrow morning. I want to own the chair he sits in, the desk he writes on, and the very air he breathes. I walked into the bathroom and stared at the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, with messy, long hair and dull eyes, the Sarah that Julian knew. That woman had to die. I grabbed the silver scissors from the counter. Snip. Long strands of brown hair fell into the marble sink. I cut it short, sharp, and angular. I washed the fear off my face and applied crimson lipstick that looked like fresh blood. When I looked up again, Seraphina Sterling was back. The housewife was gone. The predator had awakened. The morning sun glared off the fresh snow, blindingly bright. As Julian's SUV rolled slowly down the highway, my security team had dropped Lily and me off just around the bend 5 minutes earlier, ensuring our footprints looked like a weary trek from the woods. When Julian saw us, he slammed on the brakes and threw the door open. He ran toward us, his face contorted into a mask of frantic concern that would have fooled anyone but me. Sarah, oh my God! He grabbed my shoulders, shaking me slightly. I have been looking everywhere, I thought I lost you. I let my knees buckle, collapsing into his chest. Julian. It was so cold. We tried to walk, but the snow was so deep. He pulled back, and for a split second, the relief on his face flickered. Behind the performance, I saw the flash of genuine disappointment. He had wanted to find frozen corpses, not a sobbing wife and a traumatized child. You stupid woman, he hissed, lowering his voice so only I could hear, before raising it again for any potential witnesses. Why did you wander off? I told you to wait by the car. I came back 5 minutes later and you were gone. I'm sorry, I sobbed, burying my face in his coat to hide my dry eyes. I was so scared. Julian, I didn't know what to do. He shoved us into the car. Just get in. You've caused enough trouble. Back at our suburban home, the dynamic shifted exactly as I had planned. I played the role of the broken, terrified wife. I made him coffee with trembling hands. I apologized for the mud on Lily's boots. I apologized for being alive. Every apology fed his ego like gasoline on a fire. While he was in the shower washing off the stress of his search, I slipped into his home office. With practiced ease, I planted a listening device under his mahogany desk and synced another to his phone. An hour later, I sat in the laundry room with my earbuds in, listening to him call Bianca. It's fine, babe. Don't worry. Julian's voice came through, dripping with arrogance. She is a mess, a total wreck. I have her exactly where I want her. She is so traumatized she will sign anything I put in front of her. We will have the house, the car, and the divorce papers signed within a month. I just need to train her a little more. I took the earbuds out. Train me. The audacity made me want to laugh. That evening, I set the trap. I walked into the living room where he was watching TV, holding a crumpled letter I had forged earlier. Julian, I asked softly, Can I ask you something about money? I know I am not good with numbers. He didn't even look away from the screen. What is it now? Sarah, I got a letter from a lawyer. You know my great-aunt Agatha. The one I never met. I paused for effect. She passed away, apparently. She left me a small inheritance. Julian finally looked at me. How small? The letter says it is. $5 million. The remote dropped from his hand. He stood up, his eyes widening with a greed so naked it was repulsive. He walked over to me, his demeanor transforming instantly from dismissive to predatory warmth. $5 million. He licked his lips. Sarah, honey, that is amazing, but you know you can't handle that kind of money. The taxes, the investment portfolios, It is complicated. I know, I said, looking down at my feet. I was hoping you could help me. Maybe invest it for us. Of course, baby, he said, hugging me tight. Over his shoulder, I could practically see the gears turning. He wasn't planning to invest it for us. He was planning to steal it for his future with Bianca. Oh, and one more thing, I said, pulling away and handing him my iPad. This email came to my old account. I think it's spam, but it looks fancy. He took the tablet. It was an invitation forged by my team at Sterling inviting leading architectural visionaries to bid on the design for the Infinity Tower, a multi-billion-dollar project shrouded in secrecy. Julian read the email, his hands starting to shake. This isn't spam. Sarah, he whispered, his voice trembling with awe. This is the Infinity Tower. They want me. They actually want me. He looked at me, his eyes shining with the manic light of a narcissist who believes the universe has finally recognized his genius. I'm going to be rich, he muttered to himself. We are so lucky, Julian, I said softly. He smirked, patting my cheek with a patronizing tap. Yes, I am very lucky. He had taken the bait. Now, I just had to reel him in. The courier arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, delivering a thick, velvet-textured envelope embossed with silver foil. Julian tore it open with trembling hands. When he pulled out the heavy cardstock invitation, he let out a whoop of joy that shook the walls of our modest kitchen. Global Design Director, he read aloud, his voice cracking with euphoria. They want me as the Global Design Director. Did you hear that? Sarah, I am a god. He did not wait to celebrate. Within an hour, he was gone, armed with the emergency credit cards he believed were linked to my credit score. He returned that afternoon driving a brand new, silver convertible sports car, wearing an Italian suit that cost more than our car. It is an investment, he declared, posing in the mirror. I have to look the part. And don't worry about the bill. Once I get my signing bonus, this debt will be... It will be nothing. His arrogance bled into his work life immediately. He called his current boss from the living room, putting him on speaker so I could hear the bridge burning. You are a small man with small ideas. Gary, Julian sneered into the phone. I am moving on to the stratosphere. You can take your little residential projects and... Shove them! He hung up, laughing hysterically. Later, I tracked his location to a high-end jewelry district. Through the listening device, I heard him with Bianca. Pick whatever you want, babe, Julian boasted. Next week, you will be my vice president. We will run the design world. What about your dowdy wife? Bianca giggled, her voice grating against my ears. Does she suspect anything, Sarah, please? She is too stupid to suspect anything. She thinks I am doing this for our family. She is just a stepping stone. Bianca. A loose brick I am about to kick away. When he returned home, the charm he had shown Bianca evaporated. He treated our home like a hotel and me like the maid. Get me a scotch. Sarah. Now, he barked, kicking his shoes off in the middle of the hallway. In the next room, Lily was singing a quiet song to her dolls. Shut that kid up, Julian roared, slamming his hand on the table. I am trying to think. I need absolute silence. I hurried to quiet Lily, my heart hammering against my ribs. I did not cower this time. As I turned my back to mix his drink, I glared at his reflection in the window with a hatred so pure it felt cold. While he was passed out from his afternoon drinking, I slipped away to meet Thorne in a nondescript sedan parked 3 blocks away. We finalized the paperwork. The transfer of the house title was complete. I had legally severed my name from the property and the mountain of high-interest loans Julian had taken out, dumping them all solely onto him. When I returned, Lily handed me a drawing. It was done in jagged black crayon. A large, white monster with sharp teeth was standing over two small stick figures in the snow. "It is Daddy," she whispered. "He is the snow monster." "I know. Baby," I said, folding the paper carefully and locking it in my safe. "This is going to help us very much." That night, Julian slapped a document onto the kitchen island. "Sign this," he commanded. "It is the power of attorney for your aunt's inheritance. I need full control to move the funds into high-yield accounts before my interview tomorrow." I picked up the pen, feigning hesitation. "Are you sure?" "Julian, it looks complicated. Just sign the damn paper." "Sarah, do you want us to be rich or not?" I signed. He snatched the paper away, grinning like a shark. He had no idea what he had just done. The document was a masterfully crafted legal trap. He hadn't just taken control of a fictional $5 million, he had legally acknowledged full personal liability for the shell company he had been using to embezzle funds. He had just confessed to his own crimes in ink. Tomorrow is the big day. He sighed, stretching his arms. Finally. I get what I deserve. He went to bed early, dreaming of corner offices and magazine covers. I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing. He was sleeping next to the architect of his destruction, and he had never slept more soundly in his life. The Sterling Tower rose above the city skyline like a monolith of black obsidian, a 50-story monument to power that swallowed the reflection of the clouds. From my private viewing deck on the top floor, I watched Julian's silver sports car pull up to the curb. He stepped out, adjusting his tie in the window reflection, oblivious to the fact that he was walking into the belly of the beast. He entered the lobby with the stride of a man who already owned the place. On the surveillance monitors. I watched him bypass the queue at the front desk. He snapped his fingers at the receptionist. "I am here for the board interview," Julian announced, his voice carrying over the microphone feed. "Tell them Julian Vance is here, and get me a coffee. Black. No sugar." The receptionist, following my strict instructions, simply pointed him toward the elevators without a word. He scoffed, shaking his head at what he perceived as incompetence. He was escorted to a waiting room on the 45th floor. It was luxurious, filled with Italian leather furniture and modern art, but it was also a cell. I let him sit there. For 1 hour, then 2, then 3. By the 4th hour, his confidence was beginning to fray at the edges. He paced the room like a caged tiger, checking his watch every 30 seconds. He pulled out his phone, typing furiously. On the massive screen in my command center, his text messages appeared in real time. "Julian, these people are making me wait. It is a power play. They are testing me. Bianca Julian, answer me, I just got fired. The CEO came down personally. He said I was morally bankrupt. You have to do something, Julian, stop crying. Once I get this job, I will buy that little firm and fire him. I will crush them all for you." I sipped my tea, watching the digital promise of revenge. He had no idea that the CEO who fired Bianca was acting on a memo I had signed that morning. Finally, at 2 in the afternoon, the double doors to the waiting room opened. A silent assistant beckoned him to follow. Julian straightened his jacket, smoothed his hair, and put his mask of arrogance back on. He was led down a long, dimly lit corridor that ended at the main boardroom. He stepped inside. The room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city he wanted to conquer. The blinds were drawn halfway, casting the room in heavy shadows. At the far end of an endless mahogany table sat 5 figures my board of directors shrouded in darkness. At the center of the room, illuminated by a single spotlight, was one empty chair. Julian hesitated for a fraction of a second, intimidated by the theatricality of it, but his ego quickly took over. He sat down, crossing his legs. "Welcome, Mr. Vance." A distorted voice boomed from the overhead speakers. It was Thorne, speaking from the control room next to mine. In your application, you wrote about a philosophy. You called it the art of subtraction. You said that to build something great, one must eliminate weak elements. Elaborate. Julian leaned forward, his eyes gleaming in the spotlight. He thought this was his moment. He thought he was speaking to kindred spirits. It is simple, Julian said, his voice smooth and practiced. Success is about aerodynamics. Drag is the enemy. In architecture, we cut unnecessary supports. In life, we must be willing to cut unnecessary people. He stood up and began to pace, gesturing passionately. Just last night, I faced a choice. He lied, weaving his crime into a metaphor for strength. I was driving through a blizzard. I had heavy luggage that was slowing me down. The car was skidding. It was dangerous. So, I opened the door and I pushed the weight out. I left it behind in the storm. And because I did that, I survived. I moved faster. I reached my destination. He looked at the shadowy figures, expecting applause. A leader must be willing to do the unthinkable, he concluded, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. A leader does not carry dead weight. He buries it. I watched him from behind the one-way glass, my hand resting on the glass surface. He was so proud of his metaphor. He had no idea that a tiny red light on the wall indicated that his entire speech was being live-streamed. Every employee at his old firm was watching. The police were watching. And Bianca, sitting in her apartment with her termination letter, was watching him call her and me dead weight. He thought he was auditioning for a job. In reality, he was narrating his own confession to the world. The theatrical spotlight cut out instantly, replaced by the harsh, clinical glare of the overhead fluorescent lights. Julian blinked rapidly, shielding his eyes as the room was bathed in a brightness that left no corner for shadows to hide. At the head of the long mahogany table, the massive leather executive chair remained turned away from him, its high back facing the room like a throne occupied by a phantom. Thorne stepped out from the gloom in the corner. He did not extend a hand for a handshake. Instead, he tossed a heavy stack of documents onto the polished wood surface. They landed with a heavy, condemning thud that echoed in the silence. We found the presentation regarding your philosophy very illuminating. Mr. Vance, Thorne said, his voice stripped of any warmth. However, we are more interested in your practice of subtraction regarding company assets. Julian looked down at the papers. His confident smile faltered. Spread out before him were bank transfers, credit card statements, and detailed logs of the shell companies he had created. What is this? Julian stammered, his face draining of color. Evidence. Thorne replied efficiently. Embezzlement from your current firm. Tax evasion. Money laundering through online gambling sites. It is all there. Julian scoffed. A nervous, hacking sound. He pushed the papers away as if they were contaminated. This is a misunderstanding. You have dug into my personal finances, which is illegal, by the way. But if you must know, my wife handles the books. She is incompetent. She must have errors. I have been meaning to fix her messes for months. He was doing it again. Even when cornered, his instinct was to use me as a human shield. Thorne did not argue. He simply pressed a button on a small remote. My voice, from the recording I had made in the laundry room, filled the air, clear and undeniable. I was hoping you could help me. Maybe invest it for us. Then Julian's voice followed, smug and predatory. Just sign the damn paper. Sarah, do you want us to be rich or not? Followed by his conversation with Bianca? She is just a stepping stone, a loose brick I am about to kick away. The silence that followed the recording was deafening. Julian looked around the room, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. That is taken out of context, he yelled, standing up. I am a candidate for a directorship. You cannot treat me like this. My current employer will hear about this harassment. Thorne looked at him with an expression of mild pity. Your current employer? Thorne asked. You are referring to Apex Horizons, yes. And when I tell them you cannot tell them anything, Thorne interrupted smoothly. As of yesterday evening, Sterling Industries completed a hostile takeover of Apex Horizons. We own the company, Mr. Vance, and as the new owners, we have processed your termination effective immediately for gross ethical misconduct. Julian froze. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. The safety net he thought he had was gone. He was unemployed, exposed, and trapped, but his delusion was a powerful drug. He let out a breathless, jagged laugh, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Fine, fine, Julian chuckled, spreading his arms wide. So you bought my company. That proves you value talent. You fired me just to hire me here, didn't you? You need someone with my vision. The past is the past. I am ready to work for Sterling. I am ready to lead. Thorne smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of a predator looking at a wounded animal. We do need you here, Julian, Thorne said softly, but not to lead. We need you here to witness. Witness what the true owner of this room. Thorne pointed to the massive screen behind him. The image flickered to life. It was a live feed of a playroom. The walls were painted with soft murals, and toys were scattered everywhere. In the center of the frame, Lily was laughing, chasing a robotic dog. She looked happy, safe, and completely unharmed. Julian squinted at the screen. Confusion clouded his face. That is my daughter. How do you have a video of my daughter? He took a step closer to the screen, and then he stopped. He recognized the room. He had seen it in Architectural Digest magazines. It was the legendary Safe Haven Playroom, a fortress of luxury designed exclusively for the Sterling family heirs inside the headquarters. She is in the building, Julian whispered, the blood leaving his face completely. Why is my daughter in the Sterling private suite? Because she belongs here, Thorne said. And so does her mother. At that moment, the high-backed chair at the head of the table began to slowly swivel around. The heavy leather chair completed its slow rotation, and the silence in the room shattered. I sat there, legs crossed, wearing a tailored white suit that cost more than the house Julian thought he owned. My hair was sharp and styled, my makeup flawless, and my expression carved from ice. I was no longer the disheveled woman shivering in a winter coat. I was the CEO. Julian stared at me. His mouth hung open, his eyes darting from my face to the board members in the shadows, waiting for the punchline of a joke that did not exist. He looked at me like a man trying to comprehend a new color. Sarah, he choked out, his voice cracking. What are you... Is this a prank? Why are you sitting in that chair? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the mahogany table. Welcome to the final interview. Husband, I said, my voice echoing with a power he had never heard from me before. A vein popped in his forehead. Rage overtook his confusion. He lunged toward the table, his hands reaching for me. You bitch! You think you can play games with me while I am trying to... Two massive security guards stepped out of the darkness before he could take a second step. They grabbed him by the shoulders and slammed him back into his seat. The force knocked the wind out of him. I picked up a folder and slid 2 documents across the long table. They spun perfectly, stopping right under his nose. Read it, I commanded. He looked down. One was a DNA test confirming Lily's lineage. The other was a notarized certificate of inheritance. I am not just Seraphina Vance, the housewife you despise, I said, standing up slowly. I am Seraphina Sterling. My father founded this empire. And you? You just threw the sole heiress of $2.3 billion into a blizzard to die. Julian blanched. He read the papers, his hands shaking so violently that the paper rattled against the wood. The reality of his mistake crashed down on him. He hadn't just attempted murder. He had attempted to murder a gold mine. He looked up at me, and I watched his survival instinct kick in. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a pathetic, weeping performance. Tears streamed down his face. "Sarah, baby, please," he sobbed, reaching a hand out. "I didn't know I was under so much pressure. The debts, the work. I just wanted to provide for us. I wasn't thinking straight. I would never actually hurt you. I was coming back. I swear, I was coming back for you." "Stop it." I cut him off. "I have the dash cam footage. Julian, I heard you call our daughter a burden. I heard you laugh about freezing us to death. I was venting. It was just stress," he screamed, his voice rising to a shrill panic. "We can fix this with this money. Think of what we can do. We can be a power couple. Sarah, you and me, I can run the company for you." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You will never run anything again. Do you remember that power of attorney you signed last night, the one for the $5 million? He nodded frantically. "Yes, I can manage that for you. We can start fresh." "There is no $5 million. Julian, that was a trap. The document you signed was an assumption of debt. You voluntarily took on the liabilities of a failing shell company. As of this morning, you personally owe the IRS and 3 private creditors over $12 million. His face turned a sickly shade of gray. You tricked me. I just gave you what you wanted. Total control." Suddenly, his phone buzzed loudly on the table. The screen lit up with a photo of Bianca. I reached over and pressed the speaker button. Julian Bianca's voice shrieked into the room. "Why aren't you answering? Did you get the job? I need you to fix this. Security is escorting me out of the building." "Hello, Bianca," I said. There was a pause on the line. "Sarah, why do you have Julian's phone?" "Julian is indisposed," I said coolly. "This is Serafina Sterling speaking. You are currently trespassing on my property. And just so you know, I have flagged your license. No reputable architecture firm in this state will hire you. You are done." "What, you can't?" "Julian, say something." I hung up the phone and looked back at my husband. He sat slumped in the chair, a hollow shell of the man who had walked in 10 minutes ago. He looked at his hands, then at me, realizing the absolute totality of his destruction. He had no job, he had no mistress, he had no reputation, and now, he realized, he had no freedom. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice trembling with genuine terror. What happens to me now?" I sat back down in the leather chair, looking at him with the same indifference he had shown me on the mountain pass. "Now," I said, "the real storm begins." The double doors of the boardroom burst open with a force that rattled the glass walls, signaling the end of Julian's delusions. 6 uniformed police officers and 2 agents wearing FBI windbreakers marched into the room, moving with the grim efficiency of a storm making landfall. Julian jumped up, knocking his leather chair backward with a loud crash. He looked for an exit, but the wall of law enforcement had already sealed the room. "Julian Vance," the lead agent barked, holding up a folded warrant. "You are under arrest." For what? Julian screamed, backing away until his legs hit the edge of the mahogany table. "I did nothing. I am a victim here. She is the one you want." The agent ignored him, reading from the paper with a monotone voice that made the words sound even more terrifying. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of attempted first-degree murder, wire fraud, grand larceny, and felony child endangerment." The color drained from Julian's face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. "Murder. No, that is insane." It was just a drive. I was going back. 2 officers moved in, grabbing his arms. Julian struggled violently, thrashing like a trapped animal. "She set me up," he howled, saliva flying from his mouth as he pointed a shaking finger at me. "She is a liar. She tricked me into signing those papers. She hid her money to trap me." "It's entrapment." I stood up slowly. The room went silent, save for Julian's ragged breathing. I walked around the long table, the sound of my heels on the marble floor echoing like gunshots. I stopped inches from his face, looking into his wild, terrified eyes. "I did not trick you, Julian," I said, my voice calm and cold. "I did not force you to steal from your clients. I did not force you to cheat, and I certainly did not force you to throw our daughter out of a moving car into a snowbank." I leaned in closer, letting him see the absolute lack of mercy in my eyes. "I did not set a trap," I whispered. "I simply handed you a rope. And you chose to use it to hang yourself." The officers kicked his legs apart and slammed him against the wall to frisk him. The metallic click of the handcuffs engaging was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. "Wait," I commanded as they began to drag him toward the door. The officers paused. I looked at Julian's wrist. "Thorne," I said, not taking my eyes off my husband, "confiscate his watch and the keys to the convertible downstairs. Those were purchased with stolen company funds. We will liquidate them to pay back the homeowners he defrauded." Thorne stepped forward and unclasped the luxury watch from Julian's wrist. Julian watched his last symbol of status disappear into Thorne's pocket, and a sob broke from his throat. "You can't do this," he wept, his fight gone. "Sarah, please, I am your husband. Get him out of here," I said, turning my back on him. They dragged him to the elevators, but his punishment was just beginning. I had timed this perfectly. When the police escorted him out of the main lobby doors of the Sterling Tower, they walked straight into a blinding wall of flashing lights. Dozens of reporters and camera crews were waiting on the sidewalk, tipped off about the arrest of the billionaire heiress's husband. Julian, disheveled, weeping, and handcuffed, was shoved into the back of a squad car while the world watched. By the time I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window in my office, the headlines were already populating the news feeds. "Ruthless architect abandons heiress, wife, and child in blizzard. The monster of Wolf Creek." I looked down at the street 50 stories below. The police lights were just tiny specks of red and blue fading into the traffic. I took a deep breath. I expected to feel happy, but instead, I felt a vast, quiet emptiness. The fear was gone, replaced by a clean slate. I turned to Thorne, who was standing silently by the door with his notepad. "It is done, madam," he said softly. "Not quite," I replied, walking back to my desk. "Contact the legal department immediately. I want his name scrubbed from every document regarding my daughter. Birth certificate, school records, medical files. As far as the world is concerned, Lily never had a father." The wheels of justice usually turn slowly, but when powered by the engine of the Sterling legal team, they spun at a terrifying, efficient speed. Within 3 weeks, we were sitting in a high-security courtroom for an expedited sentencing hearing. Julian sat at the defense table, looking small and defeated in an oversized orange jumpsuit. His arrogant posture was gone, replaced by a twitching, nervous energy as his lawyer tried to paint him as a victim of temporary insanity brought on by financial stress. I took the stand not as a victim, but as a witness to a crime. I wore a simple black dress, my face composed and dry. I recounted the night of the blizzard with a clinical precision that seemed to unsettle the jury more than tears would have. I described the temperature, the sound of the door locking, and the image of my daughter tumbling into the snow. Julian's defense attorney, a sweaty man who looked like he knew he was fighting a losing battle, tried one last desperate tactic. He stood up, pointing an accusing finger at me. "Mrs. Vance, or should I say, Miss Sterling, you deceived my client for years," the lawyer announced, pacing in front of the jury box. "You hid a fortune of over $2 billion. You played a role. You manipulated him into a state of financial panic. Is it not true that if you had been honest, none of this would have happened? You trapped him in a lie." A murmur ran through the courtroom. I looked at the lawyer, then I looked directly at Julian, who was refusing to meet my eyes. "Objection!" the prosecutor shouted. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "I will answer." I leaned into the microphone. My bank account is not a justification for attempted murder. I hid my money because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I owned. And when the test came, he did not just fail. He tried to kill us. He did not abandon us because I was poor. He abandoned us because he is a monster. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Judge Harrison, a stern woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much of humanity's dark side, cleared her throat. She looked down at the evidence screen where the video of Julian pushing Lily out of the moving car was paused. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Mr. Vance, please stand," Judge Harrison commanded. Julian scrambled to his feet, his chains rattling. "I have sat on this bench for 20 years, the judge said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "I have seen greed, and I have seen violence. But the callousness you displayed toward your own flesh and blood is in a category of its own. You blamed stress. You blamed your wife. You have taken zero responsibility." She slammed her gavel down. "I am stripping you of all parental rights. Effective immediately. Furthermore, for the charges of attempted murder, child endangerment, and grand larceny, I sentence you to the maximum penalty allowed under the law. You are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." "No," Julian screamed, his knees buckling. 25 years. That is my whole life. Sarah, please." 2 bailiffs moved in, hoisting him up by his armpits. He thrashed against them, looking back at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Sarah, tell them we can make a deal. I love you." I stood up and turned my back to him. I did not look back as his screams faded into the hallway, cut off by the heavy thud of the courtroom doors. It was over. The man who had haunted my life was now just a number in a system. I walked out of the courtroom and into the lobby where Lily was waiting with Mrs. Higgins. As soon as she saw me, she ran into my arms. I lifted her up, burying my face in her neck, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "Is the bad man gone?" she whispered. "Yes, baby," I said, kissing her forehead. "He is gone forever." We walked out of the heavy courthouse doors. The sky was gray, and a light snow had started to fall, dusting the city in white. For a second, the memory of the mountain pass flashed in my mind, the biting cold, the fear, the darkness. But then, a long, sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out, opening the door to reveal a warm, glowing interior with soft leather seats. I stepped inside, settling Lily onto the seat next to me. The warmth enveloped us instantly. Mommy Lily asked, looking out the window at the falling snow. "Where are we going?" I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes for the first time in years. I looked toward the horizon, where the Sterling Tower pierced the clouds, a beacon of the future we were going to build. "We are going to our real home, my love," I said. The heavy door of the limousine clicked shut, sealing out the cold, sealing out the past, and leaving the storm behind us as we drove forward into the light. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Julian's punishment. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.